Hey friends, it's Mike. It's Sunday, December 5th, 2021, and last night I finally had the opportunity to sit down and watch episode 1 of Peter Jackson's documentary Get Back. I took notes. I haven't watched episode 2 or 3 yet, and I probably won't get into as much detail with 2 and 3 as I am with episode 1. But let me get to my notes now and let me share my impressions. So, I found episode 1 to be very long and tedious. I found myself checking the time to see how much time was left. The film was very slow moving. In my opinion, it did not live up to the hype of the trailers and promos that were put out. It was highly edited. And again, the premise of Get Back is the Beatles were going to write and record 14 new songs in less than 3 weeks, which, as I've mentioned in other videos, is a stretch to say the least. They were going to play the new songs at 2 live shows on January 19th and 20th. However, the venue for these live shows was undecided. The schedule was complicated even further because Ringo was to begin filming the Magic Christian movie later in the month on January 24th. And remember, the Beatles arrived at the studio on January 2nd. Twickenham, which was the studio they started at, was a big, empty, acoustically challenged warehouse with no recording equipment, and there was a total lack of planning around the sessions in general. It was clear to me that Billy was in charge. I thought John displayed arrested developed behavior, George was clearly not happy, and Ringo looked hungover and tired. So based on episode 1, I thought there was a very good reason why this footage was cut from the original 1970 film. And as I mentioned, I still have to watch episodes 2 and 3, and hopefully those episodes are more watchable. The film starts by telling us there was over 60 hours of film footage and over 150 hours of audio. So if we break down the numbers, 60 is 6 plus 0, which equals 6. 150, 1 plus 5 plus 0 equals 6. And we start the film with the number 66. The film states at the beginning that editorial choices had to be made where audio was supplemented with pictures, meaning some scenes were created to give a visual to the recorded dialogue or audio. The film text at the beginning also tells us the filmmakers attempted to present an accurate depiction of the events and people. We are shown the 1960 Hamburg story and how the lads played 8 hours a night in Germany. This goes to my argument that no songs were written during the Hamburg period. In a Pete Best interview that I've played in a couple of videos, he tells us they played 7 to 8 hours a night, then they left the club to go to sleep, woke up at around 3 p.m. in the afternoon, and had about 2 to 3 hours before they needed to be back at the club again. So in Hamburg it was play, sleep, and eat. And then we're told about the lads playing at the Cavern on a regular basis. We are then shown Beatlemania footage, which of course was all manufactured by Tavistock to sell the Beatle brand and thus the PSYOP. And then we see a snippet of them playing the Ed Sullivan Show, and what I noticed, there are no amplifiers on the stage. So this goes to my premise that for major performances, they were playing to backing tracks or there were studio musicians backstage playing the actual music. And then at 5 minutes and 20 seconds into episode 1, we are shown the frame from the Yellow Submarine film where there are 2 Pauls. So Peter dropped a Paul is dead clue within 5 minutes of his documentary. So of all the frames that Peter could have possibly shown from the Yellow Submarine film, he showed that one. And then the film runs the footage of the record burning as a result of John's comments that the Beatles were bigger than Jesus. And as I have discussed previously in other videos, John's comments regarding Christianity and the Beatles was completely scripted, and the record burning was an occult ritual. And what I will do at the end of my review is to tack on a clip from I Am a Phony which explains this ritual process of record burning. Then the film segues to Sgt Pepper and tells us the Beatles pioneered new recording techniques when in fact those recording techniques were pioneered by George Martin. And then we are shown a snippet from the Hey Jude promo film, which appears to be live, but it is not live. The Beatles were playing to a backing track. We can clearly see where John's strumming of his guitar is not in sync with the strumming that we hear on the song. And then we get more into the backstory with regard to the Get Back sessions, and we're told that the Beatles are going to write and record 14 new songs that will be performed live with no overdubs or studio tricks, but they have limited time. Ringo, as I mentioned, is scheduled to shoot The Magic Christian on January 24th, so we are again getting the ridiculous time constraint narrative that nobody but the Beatles can pull off. Then we are shown the calendar, and there is a dress rehearsal scheduled for January 18th in preparation for the January 19th and 20th shows. Now remember, they walked into the studio on January 2nd. So 16 days from when they walk into the studio, they're going to have a dress rehearsal, and according to the calendar in the film, they don't work weekends. So all of this is being done Monday through Friday, with the exception of the dress rehearsal, which was on the 18th, which was a Sunday. So then we're told the performances will be filmed in front of an audience and then broadcast at a later date. When they arrive at Twickenham, George asks, "Where's the recording equipment?" And John responds, they didn't need recording equipment because it was rehearsal, but then shortly afterward, they decide that they do need recording equipment, and so they make plans to have a makeshift studio put together. So talk about lack of planning. Throughout episode 1, George is questioning the schedule, the lack of logistics, etc. He's displaying a voice of reason, and you can tell he's getting frustrated. George also comments on the first day that Twickenham's acoustics weren't very good, and that's because Twickenham is a big, wide-open warehouse. We then hear an early version of I've Got a Feeling, so it was obvious to me that they had some songs, at least working versions or ideas, coming into the sessions. I don't believe they were writing all of the songs from scratch, which is what the film appears to try to sell us on. In fact, we know this is not the case because later on in episode 1, George talks about some songs that he wrote and brought into the sessions, like Isn't It a Pity? And from watching the film, it seems to me that Two of Us, Don't Let Me Down, and I've Got a Feeling were in draft form going into the Get Back sessions. Then there was some strange dialogue between Ringo and Dennis O'Dell, where Ringo thought starting the filming of The Magic Christian on January 24th would not be a problem because he didn't see how the Get Back sessions would go more than 2 weeks. And I was thinking, really, Ringo? I'm watching the film and seeing day 1, and I already know the schedule was in big trouble. So that was very weird. Then on day 2, we are told that the Beatles were reconsidering playing some of their earliest songs in order to get through the schedule. So in other words, they were going to go to a backlog of songs that they already knew to complement new songs because they were seeing that the schedule was breaking down. Then there was a number of times throughout episode 1 where it was obvious the dialogue was inserted or voiced over a particular scene. And this goes back to what I was saying earlier, where Peter said that certain audio was supplemented with visuals in order to bring together the visual and audio aspects of the film. I did catch moments when the dialogue did not match the movement of the mouth. A number of folks commented on this in the comments section on my previous video. There were moments when the faces had a shadow effect applied, and therefore you couldn't see the mouth movement in order to tell if the footage was synced up with the dialogue. And sometimes it looked like I was watching an old Godzilla movie. And then we watch a brief run-through of One After 909, and John says, quote, "I wrote that when I was 15, except the dialogue sounded like it was inserted into the scene. It did not sound natural when I heard it, and I played it back a few times." So I found that interesting. They then played I've Got a Feeling again, and it was painful. And just to note, you never hear a complete song throughout episode 1. It's all snippets. Then there's dialogue where George is assessing his own guitar playing, and he says that he can, quote, learn and play things now, which came across as an odd thing to say. And then he goes on to say that he cannot play like Eric Clapton. So here we are getting an honest assessment from George about his playing abilities. Then on Monday, January 6th, George suggests forgetting about the show, which was reasonable considering how things were going. Then the equipment is being brought in to put together the makeshift studio, and that was the words that were used in the film, makeshift studio. And it was amazing to me how badly planned this whole thing was. Then there was dialogue during a Don't Let Me Down snippet that sounded like voice doubles were being used for Billy and John. It sounded very off to me. We also see Billy in his managerial role during Don't Let Me Down, which if you didn't know any better, you would have thought that it was a song that he wrote because he was directing the others, including John, on the song. And then there's conversation where they say that they have run through 4 songs, but they haven't learned any. And then we get to the terse discussion between Billy and George during Two of Us, where Billy tells George, "I always seem to annoy you," and George responds with, quote, "You don't annoy me anymore," which made me chuckle. Because what was implied in George's response is he has gotten past Billy annoying him. And you get the feeling that George is not taken seriously by either Billy or John throughout episode 1. And I did feel for George as I watched and listened to the dynamics. Then Billy talks about him being the boss and has been for a couple of years. So this is direct evidence that Billy is running the band. So the Get Back sessions were in January of 1969, so a couple of years takes us back to January 1967, and the timing syncs up as to when Billy took over, which would have been in late 1966, going into Sgt Pepper. Then there was dialogue, this time between Billy and George, that appeared to me to be dubbed in. Then they take another run at Two of Us, and again, it was painful. We see Billy pushing Two of Us, which from my personal perspective, I never considered to be a great song. But he pushes it throughout episode 1. And then we move to January 7th. Remember, they arrived on January 2nd, so this is the 5th day. And Ringo looks perpetually hungover and George frustrated. Collectively, they talk about having no songs in the bag. We have Billy complaining about receiving no support from the other Beatles. George comments that the Beatles have been in the doldrums ever since Brian Epstein died, which was back in August of 1967, and things have been very negative since his passing. So this goes back to what I have presented previously, where the band was having tensions way before the Get Back sessions as well as for years afterward. Billy tells them they have no discipline and says we either do a show or we don't. And then George says maybe we should get a divorce, and Billy responds that we are getting near that point. And then we have Michael Lindsay Hogg trying to give them a pep talk, which didn't appear to go anywhere. Then on January 8th, George brings in I Me Mine, and Billy's body language looks like he's humoring George. And as I mentioned, to me it came across that Billy and John did not take George seriously. That was my impression. We see a cameo of George Martin, but he is very subdued. After watching what was going on during the sessions, he's probably thinking he wants no part of this. George Martin ran a very tight ship, and when Billy took over, things appeared to get less disciplined. And maybe that was because John, George, and Ringo respected George Martin more than Billy. Just a thought. And let's also remember that George Martin walked out of the White Album sessions. So I'm thinking the Let It Be sessions was just a carryover from what was experienced during the recording of the White Album. Then we get snippets of Two of Us, I've Got a Feeling, and Don't Let Me Down. But again, we never hear a song all the way through. Then, at 1 hour, 25 minutes, and 50 seconds, we have a scene of Billy and John facing each other, and we can clearly see Billy is taller than John, and noticeably so. So if you get a chance, check that out. Then there's a scene of the Beatles and various others involved in the sessions talking about the show they're supposed to do, and it's totally disorganized. They're talking about an amphitheater in Libya, and as I was watching and listening, I was thinking, are they actually talking about playing there? Or are they talking about constructing a set that looks like that venue? The entire premise was becoming ludicrous. And George is seeing the impossibility of all of this, and he asks a very, very reasonable question: how are we going to get all the equipment there? And again, George is the only one that comes across who is thinking rationally. And then we hear a conversation between Ringo and the director, Michael Lindsay Hogg, where Ringo says, "We have been grumpy for 18 months. And again, that takes us back to 1967, around the release of Sgt Pepper. So I thought, well, that's more proof that things weren't going well for the Beatles. And then on January 9th, Billy jokes that maybe we should have the concert on a farm in Scotland. And then Linda arrives during the sessions with her camera. I noticed that she has really long fingers, and so long that it looked weird. So I don't know if that was a result of enhancing the footage or whether she just has really long fingers. Yoko is always dressed in black as if she's attending a funeral, and maybe she knew something that they didn't. And then we see Billy playing the piano and sampling early versions of Golden Slumbers, Carry That Weight, Let It Be, and Long and Winding Road. And then Billy suggests that they do other people's tunes. So this is where they are at with a lack of new material and with this very, very constrained and compressed timeline. The makeshift studio is just about done at this point, and that's 7 days after they arrive. And then on January 10th, George Harrison walks out. Then we get snippets of Billy, John, and Ringo jamming to songs and horsing around, just time-wasting stuff when there is no time to waste. The playing was very rough. Then we get the unfortunate experience of hearing Yoko squeal into the microphone as Billy, John, and Ringo are her backing band. So that's my summary of episode 1. For me, it was sluggish, disjointed, and it appeared heavily edited. And I have to be honest, I truly expected better. I did not analyze the film to see if I could pick up on any AI or CGI enhancements. I'm not an expert in that area, and maybe Paul Jansen will come back and talk to that aspect of the film. Although I will say there was something not natural about the way Linda looked. She almost looked airbrushed, for lack of a better way to describe it. So to wrap up, Episode 1 did not paint a happier picture of the Beatles during this period. They came across as dysfunctional. I will watch Episode 2 and 3 as soon as I can, but I won't get into as much detail as I did with this review. I will look to capture the key points and then summarize my thoughts with the other episodes. So, that's it, my friends. The comment section is open. Let me know what you think, and thanks for listening.
They burned their records and spit on their images. But before they burned the records, they had to buy them.
We meant more to kids than Jesus did. I was just saying it as a fact. I was using expressions on things that I just read.
The Passover plot speculates that the Bible is a hoax and that Jesus didn't die on the cross. Jesus survived, and in order to create a new religion with himself as the Messiah, he made people believe that he'd risen from the dead.
He said to me once that the children of 2000 will be listening to the Beatles.
By 2012, the masses would be where we are today, and Paul should be Jesus by then.
Religion from Jesus.